I swear, the first sign of trouble in a marriage isn't the late nights, the secretive phone calls, or even the sudden interest in Pilates. It's enthusiasm. When your spouse starts being too cheerful, too accommodating, almost like they're running a customer loyalty program on you, you should start looking for the hidden fees. Carol, my wife of 8 years, had suddenly become the most considerate person I had ever met. The woman who once sighed so dramatically when I asked her to hand me the remote that I thought she might collapse from exhaustion was now refilling my coffee without me asking, smiling a little too wide when I got home, laughing at my jokes that, let's be honest, had not improved with time. If marriage has taught me anything, it's that a woman doesn't start laughing at the same joke she's ignored for years unless she has a reason. And that reason is rarely good. But I let it slide. Maybe Carol was just going through a phase. Maybe she read one of those self-improvement books about being more present in your marriage. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally realized what an absolute delight it was to be married to me. I wasn't going to argue with progress. Then came the trophy. It showed up on our living room shelf one evening like it had always been there, positioned right between our wedding photo and a souvenir mug from Florida. A sleek, glass thing with some swirly design on it, about the size of a grapefruit. No engraving. No plaque. Just there. Now, I don't claim to be the most observant man on the planet, but I know for a fact that my wife has never been awarded anything in her life that she wouldn't immediately post about online. This was a woman who once got a free latte at a coffee shop because they messed up her order and took a picture of it with the caption "winning at life." And yet, here was this unidentified trophy. Silent. Mysterious. Uncelebrated. Hey, I said casually, nodding toward the thing as Carol stirred her tea with a concentration normally reserved for bomb defusal. What's this? She looked up, blinked like she had forgotten I existed, then followed my gaze. Oh, she said, giving a little laugh that I would later remember as deeply incriminating. It's just something from work. Carol worked in insurance. I had yet to hear of a cutthroat insurance competition that rewarded top agents with abstract sculptures, but I let it go. For about 3 days. Then, while getting a screwdriver from the junk drawer, which, by the way, contained precisely 1 screwdriver and 47 batteries of unknown charge, I noticed something else. A key. Not just any key. A key that was not to our house, our mailbox, or our car. A key that had no rightful place in our drawer of assorted nonsense. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand. It was heavier than I expected, worn, like it had been used often. I turned toward Carol, who was at the kitchen counter, diligently scrolling through her tablet. Hey, I said, holding it up. What's this for? She glanced over, then back to her screen. Oh, I think it's from the old storage unit. The one we cleared out last year? She paused. Yes. See, now I had a problem. My wife was either developing memory issues, or she was lying to me. I'll give you 3 guesses which one my gut was betting on. I nodded slowly and put the key back in the drawer, right next to a flashlight that hadn't worked since the Obama administration. I told myself to drop it. I really did. But then, that Saturday, Carol left for one of her new hobbies, something about networking because, of course, all marriages thrive on the mystery of vague explanations. I had the house to myself. And like any responsible, mature husband, I did what any man in my position would do. I took the key and left. There was a moment, as I stood in front of the door it unlocked, where I considered that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Carol had just forgotten about the key. Maybe I was about to open this door and find a perfectly innocent storage space filled with old Christmas decorations and broken chairs. Maybe I was the crazy one. And then I turned the key, stepped inside, and came face to face with a life I had no idea existed. I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was the chair. Not just any chair. This was the kind of chair you see in those modern furniture stores where nothing looks like it was designed for actual human use. A sleek, expensive-looking thing that had absolutely no reason to exist in a storage unit. It was placed right in the center of the room, like someone had carefully arranged it for a very specific purpose. And that purpose was definitely not sitting, because when I went to test it, the legs wobbled in a way that suggested it had never actually been used for its intended function. Interesting. Then I looked around the room and noticed the rest of it. A small folding table pushed against the wall. A Bluetooth speaker. A half-empty bottle of some overpriced sparkling water, the kind that makes you question why normal water isn't good enough. A phone charger plugged into an extension cord, still dangling, like someone had unplugged their phone and left in a hurry. And then there were the papers. Scattered across the table, half-stacked, like someone had meant to organize them but got distracted. I walked over and picked up the first one on top. A receipt. Not a normal receipt. Not a grocery store or gas station receipt. This was one of those fancy, itemized invoices from a high-end hotel. The kind of place that has decorative pillows no one is allowed to touch. I glanced at the date. Last week. Carol was supposed to be at a work event last week. I picked up another paper. Another hotel receipt. A different hotel. A different date. This one was from 2 months ago, a time when Carol had been out with friends. The stack was deeper than I expected. A trail of transactions, each one a little more damning than the last. Different hotels, different nights, but all of them with the same thing in common. My wife, spending time somewhere she had absolutely no reason to be. Now, this was the moment when a smarter man might have taken a step back, might have decided to confront his wife like a rational adult instead of playing detective. I, unfortunately, have never been that man. Instead, I kept looking. And that's when I found the envelope. It wasn't hidden, just sitting on the table like it belonged there. No name on it. Just thick, a little heavy, sealed. I picked it up, turned it over, and felt that quiet, awful feeling in my gut that said, "Do not open this." I opened it. Inside were 2 things. The first was cash. A lot of it. Neatly stacked bills, crisp like they had come straight from the bank. The second was a piece of paper, folded in half. I unfolded it, and my brain took an extra second to catch up to what I was looking at. A lease. For an apartment. Signed by Carol. I stared at it for what felt like forever, my mind trying to piece together what this meant. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just some bad decision made in a moment of weakness. She had an entire second life. And I had been absolutely, completely blind. Now, I'll be honest, my first reaction was not noble. There was no, maybe there's an explanation moment. No deep breath before calmly considering my options. No, my first reaction was to sit down in that ridiculous, overpriced chair and let out a short, humorless laugh, because this was impressive. Carol had managed to pull off a secret apartment, a hidden stash of money, and an entire schedule of hotel visits without me ever noticing. I had been living in a sitcom where I was the fool husband who never caught on, and she had been running an entire operation behind my back. And the worst part? I still didn't know who she was doing all of this for. I reached for my phone, took a picture of the lease, and put everything back exactly how I found it. Then I stood up, took one last look around the storage unit, and walked out, locking the door behind me. I had a wife to catch in the act. Carol walked into the house at 7:42 p.m., right on schedule. Not that she knew I had started timing her exits and arrivals like some kind of human flight tracker, but I had. And her consistency was almost admirable. Almost. She barely glanced at me as she tossed her bag on the counter, then kicked off her shoes in the kind of lazy, careless way you only do when you're completely comfortable in your environment. I, on the other hand, was standing in the middle of the kitchen like I had just been placed there by an unseen force. "Good day?" she asked, pulling open the fridge like she had an actual right to be relaxed in this house. "Oh, the best," I said. "Life-changing, even." She didn't notice the tone. Or if she did, she ignored it. She pulled out a bottle of water, took a long sip, then finally turned toward me with a small smile. "Glad to hear it." I stared at her. The woman was incredible. Truly. Most people, when they're juggling a second life, get a little twitchy, a little paranoid. But not Carol. Carol looked well-rested. Like the weight of the world was nowhere near her shoulders. I wanted to see how far I could push it. "So, what's new with you?" I asked. She shrugged, leaning against the counter. Same old, same old. Amazing." I nodded slowly, then reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and casually tapped the screen. "That's great," I said. I was just catching up on some reading. Carol's expression didn't change, but I knew her well enough to catch the tiny shift in her posture. A barely there stiffening of her shoulders. A second-long hesitation before she took another sip of water. "What are you reading?" she asked, the picture of nonchalance. I turned the phone toward her. The screen displayed the photo I had taken earlier, the lease. The one with her name on it. The one for an apartment I had never heard of. The sip of water suddenly became an Olympic-level swallow. She lowered the bottle, eyes flicking to the screen, then to me, then back to the screen. "What's that?" I tilted my head. "That's a great question." She blinked, then forced a small, confused laugh. "I have no idea what that is." "Of course." I sighed, shaking my head, then swiped to the next photo. This one was the stack of hotel receipts. I didn't even bother speaking. just watched as she stared at the screen, eyes darting across the dates, the locations, the undeniable proof that she had been living a whole separate existence. Then, because I enjoy making bad situations worse, I scrolled one more time. Cash. The thick, crisp stack of bills from the envelope. Carol's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. She was thinking, calculating, trying to decide which version of the truth she could sell to me. So, naturally, I helped her out. Here's what I already know, I said. You've been renting an apartment. You've been staying at hotels. You have an alarming amount of cash stashed away in a storage unit that I also didn't know about. So, Carol, I'm dying to hear your explanation for all of this. She opened her mouth, closed it, then miraculously, actually laughed. Laughed. I had been waiting for a million possible reactions. Panic, denial, anger. But laughter? That was bold. You really think you've got it all figured out, huh? She said, shaking her head with a smirk that made me want to throw my phone across the room. Well, I said, I think I have a pretty solid start. She exhaled through her nose, then set the water bottle down with careful precision. Kenneth, I love you, she said, her tone suddenly soft. Oh, this was going to be good. And I love our life, she continued, looking me right in the eye like she wasn't standing in the middle of a crime scene of her own making. But I need you to understand that things are not as simple as they look. I arched an eyebrow. Then by all means, simplify them for me. She sighed again, this time with a little dramatic flair. I didn't want to tell you this, she said, but I've been working on something. Something personal. I stared at her. Oh, this was rich. Working on something? I repeated. Yes. In secret. Yes. At hotels. Carol lifted her chin. Yes. I had to hand it to her. When faced with insurmountable evidence, most people crumble. But Carol? She doubled down. I rubbed a hand down my face, trying to keep my voice even. Carol, if you tell me you've been writing a book, I'm going to walk out of this house and never come back. She frowned. What? No. Why would I? Or painting, I continued. Or taking up some new, mysterious, incredibly expensive hobby that requires you to sleep in a different bed multiple times a month. Carol rolled her eyes. Rolled her eyes. Like I was the one being ridiculous here. I'm telling you the truth, she said, folding her arms across her chest. It's work-related. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Carol, you sell insurance. Exactly, she said. I opened my eyes, staring at her in disbelief. Exactly what? She hesitated, then miraculously, seemed to realize that this particular lie had no landing spot. She sighed, rubbing her temple. Fine, she said. Maybe I haven't been completely honest with you. I just waited. She looked at the phone again, then back at me, then gave the smallest shrug. But I promise, Kenneth, it's not what you think. I tilted my head. You know, that's interesting, because you haven't actually asked me what I think yet. Her mouth opened, then shut. And for the first time all night, I saw it. The panic. Not a lot. Not enough to make her lose control. But enough for me to know one thing for certain. I wasn't anywhere close to getting the real answer yet. Carol stood there, arms crossed, looking at me like I was the one making this whole situation difficult. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, trying to decide what flavor of nonsense she was about to serve me. I let the silence stretch. People like Carol hate silence. They need control of the conversation. They need you reacting. Not me. I could wait. She sighed dramatically, as if I was forcing her to explain why she had a secret apartment, a pile of cash, and a collection of hotel stays she had conveniently never mentioned. All right, she finally said, rubbing her temples like I was giving her a migraine. Since you clearly won't let this go, I'll tell you the truth. Oh, this should be good. I've been consulting, she said, nodding like she had just solved the case. I blinked. Consulting? Yes. You. I had to pause because my brain was actively rejecting this information. You sell insurance. She waved a hand like that was a minor technicality. Exactly. And some people need advice. I stared at her. Advice. Yes. About insurance. Yes. In a different apartment. She hesitated just a second too long. It's complicated. I'll bet. I had to give her credit. She stuck to the bit. If lying was an art, Carol was Picasso. But I wasn't here to admire the brushwork. Let me get this straight, I said, arms crossed. You've been spending time in hotels, renting an apartment, and stashing cash away, all for consulting? Yes. And this consulting is so incredibly confidential that you couldn't tell your husband about it? Exactly. I just stared at her. She sighed again, shaking her head like I was being unreasonable. Kenneth, I'm not cheating on you. Oh, well, case closed, folks. I rubbed my temples, mirroring her exaggerated frustration. Carol, let me help you out here. The average person, upon being presented with overwhelming evidence of a secret life, would have an explanation ready. You? You're standing in our kitchen, throwing words at me, hoping one of them makes sense before I catch on. She scoffed. That's ridiculous. Is it? I held up my phone again, showing the lease photo. Because what I see here is a whole separate address I've never heard of. And unless you've suddenly become a real estate investor, I'd love to hear exactly what part of consulting requires a backup residence. Her mouth opened. Shut. Then she did what all truly talented liars do when cornered. She got offended. You know what, Kenneth? She snapped. This is insulting. I let out a short laugh. Oh, I'm the problem now? Yes, actually. You're acting like some paranoid. She gestured wildly at me, struggling to come up with a word. Some crazy person, digging through my things, making these wild accusations. I have done nothing wrong. That was impressive. The confidence. The sheer audacity. Oh, so we're going with the gaslighting approach, I said, nodding. Bold choice. She threw up her hands. I can't believe this. I come home after a long day, and this is what I walk into. I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. Carol, let me make something crystal clear to you. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I am not some fool who just stumbled into this situation. I gave you every chance to come clean. Every single moment to tell me something real. And you? You're standing here, acting like you're the victim. She rolled her eyes, but I saw it, the flash of something behind them. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of losing control. That's when I knew. I had her. I smiled, slow and deliberate. You know what, Carol? Let's do this your way. She blinked. What? I slid my phone back into my pocket. You're right. Maybe I'm overreacting. She hesitated. You are. Maybe there's nothing suspicious about having a second apartment, unexplained hotel stays, and cash hidden away. Exactly. I nodded. And I'm sure your colleagues will completely understand when I ask them about this consulting gig of yours. The color drained from her face. Bingo. Oh, and your sister, I added, rubbing my chin. She always keeps track of what you're up to. I'll give her a quick call. You're being ridiculous. Am I? I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and started scrolling. Let's find out. Kenneth. There it was. The voice. Not annoyed. Not dismissive. Panicked. I grinned. Ah, so now you have something to say? She opened her mouth. Shut it. Because she knew. I had all the time in the world to figure out the truth. And she was out of options. Carol looked like someone had just pulled the emergency brake on her entire life. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like she was buffering. I could see the battle happening in real time. Should she keep fighting the losing fight, or cut her losses and pivot to some new nonsense? I leaned against the counter, watching her process the slow collapse of whatever ridiculous reality she had been constructing. Take your time, I said. It's not like I have anything better to do than unravel my wife's secret double life. She let out a sharp breath, running a hand through her hair. Kenneth, you're making a mistake. Oh, I am. I gestured vaguely at the air. Is the mistake the evidence, or is it my deep and unfair insistence on acknowledging it? She shot me a glare. You're twisting everything. Carol, you rented a secret apartment. Her jaw clenched. It's not like that. I raised an eyebrow. Not like what? Because I'd love to hear what specific like that we're avoiding. She exhaled sharply, glancing at her phone like she was hoping for divine intervention in the form of a conveniently timed emergency. No such luck. And then finally, she made her decision. Fine, she said, crossing her arms. You really want the truth? Oh, desperately. She took a deep breath, bracing herself. Then she looked me right in the eye and said, I'm in a business opportunity. I blinked. Then I blinked again. I waited for the rest of the sentence. Maybe something about stocks. Maybe something about an actual business. Maybe some basic attempt at making sense. Nothing. That was the sentence. Just those 5 words, sitting there, unaccompanied, unashamed, like they meant something. I stared at her. A business opportunity. She nodded. I let out a slow breath, rubbing my temples. Carol, Carol, Carol. I pointed at the ceiling. Up there? In heaven? God is watching you say this to me. She scowled. I'm serious. Oh, I believe you're serious. That's what's making this so stunning. She straightened. It's something I've been working on for a while. Oh, I can tell. And it's not something I wanted to involve you in. I squinted at her. I'm your husband. She folded her arms again. Exactly. I paused. You know, that's not a good response. She sighed, rubbing her temple. Kenneth, I know this is a lot to process, but I need you to trust me. Trust you. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Carol, you do understand that you've spent the last 5 minutes crafting a mystery novel instead of giving me a straight answer, right? She pursed her lips, clearly debating her next move. Then, after a moment, she gave a short nod. Okay. Fine. You deserve the full picture. Oh, this should be fantastic. She lifted her chin. I have been investing. I inhaled sharply through my nose, blinking rapidly. Investing? Yes. In what? She hesitated. I pointed at her. See, this is why I don't trust you. She huffed. I can't tell you everything. Oh, I think you can. No, she insisted. There are other people involved. I held up a hand. Let me stop you right there before you try to turn this into some dramatic underground banking thriller. I gestured to myself. I am your husband. I have watched you call customer service because you forgot a password. You are not some mysterious mastermind. She rolled her eyes. I never said I was. Then tell me what's actually going on. She hesitated again. I exhaled, shaking my head. Wow. Wow what? I gave her a slow, deliberate look. You still think you can fix this? That did it. The crack. The tiny, flickering moment where she realized there was no landing spot for this particular plane. I watched as she cycled through all the exits, all the escape routes, all the backup lies she could throw at me. And then, like a true professional, she went for the last possible defense. Her arms dropped to her sides, her expression shifting from frustration to something wounded. Kenneth, she said softly, do you really think I'd do something to hurt you? I didn't even blink. Carol, I think you would commit tax fraud if it meant saving $30. She gasped, like I had just accused her of murder. That's... Oh, don't you dare try to be offended. She scoffed. I can't believe you're being so... What? I spread my hands. Observant? Realistic? Correct? She pressed her lips together. Fine. I tilted my head. Fine. What? She inhaled slowly, then gave me the worst answer I could have imagined. I'll prove it to you. I frowned. Prove what? That I'm telling the truth. Oh, this is gonna be good. She took out her phone. Give me a few days. Why do you need days? Because I have to set some things up, she said, like that was normal. I pointed at her. See, this is why I know you're lying. She groaned. Kenneth. Carol. Just trust me. I let out a short laugh. That is a huge request at the moment. She clenched her jaw. 3 days. That's all I ask. I squinted at her. And in 3 days, I'm going to see what, exactly? She hesitated, then lifted her chin. The truth. I stared at her. Then I smiled. Because here's the thing. She had just given me 3 days to figure out what she was actually hiding. 3 days. Carol had given me 3 entire days to figure out the truth before she came back with whatever bizarre explanation she was preparing. It was an insult, really. Like giving the prosecution a head start before trying to pull off the worst defense in legal history. So I got to work. First, the storage unit. I went back, but this time, I took my phone and documented everything. Every receipt, every suspiciously thick envelope of cash, every random item that didn't belong. Then I checked the little side drawer in the table that I had ignored the first time. Inside? A set of keys. 2 of them. One was obvious. It matched the storage unit key. The second? A complete mystery. I took a picture and pocketed it. Next, I made a stop at her apartment. Because, let's be honest, I wasn't waiting 3 days when I had the address sitting right in front of me. It was in one of those buildings that tried way too hard to be modern. Glass everything, furniture in the lobby that no one would ever sit in, some kind of unnecessary water feature making noise in the background. The type of place where people pretended they weren't home just to avoid talking to their neighbors. The key? Worked perfectly. I stepped inside, bracing myself for whatever insanity Carol had been hiding. And oh boy. Right away, I could tell it wasn't just some empty space she used occasionally. The fridge had groceries. There were clothes in the closet. Toiletries in the bathroom. She lived here. Not full-time, obviously, but enough to make it a real second life. And the best part? The second toothbrush in the bathroom. Now, I'm no expert in secret apartment management, but I'm pretty sure you don't need 2 toothbrushes for 1 person. I took more pictures. Every single thing that looked off. Then I checked the nightstand. Bingo. A notebook. Not just any notebook, a planner. I flipped through it, my heart rate skyrocketing as I scanned the pages. Some of it was normal, appointments, reminders, notes about work. But then there were the other entries. Dates, locations, names. And one name in particular kept showing up over and over again. Ethan. Who's Ethan, you ask? Great question. So did I. And lucky for me, Carol had conveniently written down his number right next to one of their meeting spots. Now, I considered calling it immediately, just dialing it right then and there, putting him on the spot. But then I thought, no, let's be smarter about this. So I left the apartment exactly as I found it, locked it up, and went home. Then, I did what any reasonable man would do. I Googled Ethan, and that's when I finally got the full story. Ethan was a real estate developer. The kind of guy who looked like he had been photoshopped into existence. Perfect hair, expensive suits, the whole I work out but also on a private plane look. And most importantly, divorced. Which, according to a very interesting article I found, was finalized 6 months ago. Right around the time Carol's secret apartment magically appeared. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. And I laughed. Because of course, Carol had been running around with some sleazy real estate guy. The apartment, the cash, the hotel stays, it all clicked. She was either his side project or his future investment, and either way, she had been playing 2 lives at once. And now? Now I had every single piece of the puzzle. So I waited. Carol came home at exactly 7:40 p.m. on the 3rd day, looking way too confident for someone standing in the middle of a disaster she caused. She walked in, set her bag down, and gave me a smile like this was just another Thursday. Hey. I smiled back. Hey. She paused, probably expecting me to bring it up first. I didn't. Instead, I leaned back, arms crossed, watching her like I had all the time in the world. She shifted. So, are you ready to hear the truth? I nodded. Absolutely. She smiled again, clasping her hands together like she was presenting a business plan. Kenneth, I want to be honest with you. Oh, please do. She took a deep breath, as if preparing for some great, emotional reveal. I've been working on something. A project. I tilted my head. A project? Yes. Something that could change everything for us. I grinned. Carol, if you say business opportunity again, I'm going to start charging you rent for this conversation. She let out a short, nervous laugh. No, nothing like that. I waited. Then she did it. She actually went through the entire speech. Some long, painfully rehearsed explanation about how she was investing in real estate, how she had been learning the ropes from some very successful people, how everything she was doing was for our future. She even had the audacity to use the word surprise. I let her talk. I let her dig the biggest hole possible. And when she was finally done, looking at me expectantly, I reached for my phone, opened my photos, turned the screen toward her, and scrolled. Every hotel receipt, every picture of her apartment, every Ethan-related entry in her notebook. Her face went blank. Then I scrolled one last time, to a picture of Ethan himself, the final nail in the coffin. I leaned in, dropping my voice to something calm. Carol, stop talking. She opened her mouth. I held up a finger. Nope, don't. Just let the moment sink in. I smiled, because I want you to really appreciate how badly you've handled this. She stared at me. Then she did the most predictable thing possible. She went for the last possible defense. This isn't what it looks like. I grinned. Carol, if this isn't what it looks like, I am genuinely afraid of what it actually is. She tried to speak. I stood up. And just like that, I was done. Because there was nothing left to say. She knew it. I knew it. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and paused at the door. You know, I said, shaking my head, all you had to do was be honest. But you just couldn't help yourself, could you? She swallowed hard. Kenneth. I opened the door. And I walked out. Not dramatically. Not in anger. Just done. Because the thing about secrets? They never last. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel